Hey everybody, this is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook video on how free is your mind, your brain on pandas, artificial thinking, and scarcity, um, or also your brain health. Is another way to say that. Um, yeah, so I wanted to kind of focus this video on um, a topic that is recently came up because there was a report on what countries are the most free in the world. I'll get to that later, but I was thinking, and you can guess which countries are described as the unfree, and which ones are the free, the most free. Um, this is coming from somewhere in the West, United States. I'm pretty sure. So when they're grading countries, um, countries that tend to be somewhere in North America, Europe, countries that are friends with the United States, tend to score very high, the most free places in the world, and other places that are not so friendly, or not necessarily not friendly, but are not liked by powerful people in Western countries. They're graded as not free, obviously, and it's kind of like it's a word that gets thrown around a lot. Free. It's what does it even mean, right? It's what yeah it's like free is like good. It's like holy. It's like the English word. It just kind of like that stuff that kind of maybe like it's the stuff that we want to be. It's why we as a society, like our society, is better than that other one. It's what we aspire to be. It's the optimal state in the world for free peoples to be free. But it's like this word. It's just like it's kind of a nonsensical word. The English word. There's equivalents in Greek and Latin and French and Spanish, but it's kind of a nonsensical word. The way that it gets used, um, uh, and the way that it is used to describe specific societies, specific people in those societies, right? Because you never, it's like I mean that's one problem, right? Is because you like most human brains, with the exception of maybe Neo's Keanu Reeves's brain in the Matrix, or people who literally have like thousands of Neuralink implants, or are have their brains hooked up to you know a gallons of cocktails of drugs somewhere in a whitewashed science lab, who can't literally cannot physically think. I mean, most brains are not literally in shackles with like chains around them. The way, like, because when you think of free, you think of the opposite of enslaved, right? And so when you think of a slave, you think of somebody in chains, somebody who is following orders from a master, who is has no ability to choose what they're doing, right? Their day, they are following orders. They can't move. They can't leave. The 10 feet of uh, 10 feet of chains that they are given, or in their prison. They're in a prison cell, a prisoner, right? Um, Obviously, all these things have lots of connotations, but like, so the freedom. It's a very metaphysical. It is a very airy fairy. It is a very vague thing, right? But nobody's mind is actually like encaged that way. No society literally has like it, like cordon sanitaire, or not cordon sanitaire. Those are used for pandemoniums, I'm trying not to say that word because I would like to not get this thing deranked, if possible. So, but it's kind of like there's no like actual physical cell that is like encasing a society or people's brains for the most part. I mean, obviously there are there's a place in the Levant region that has walls around it. It's an open air prison. That one literally people can't move to a large extent. If you're in a prison cell, but I mean, most people are not in prison cells. Another paradox, another nonsensical term is if the U.S. is the most free society, it has the world's largest prison population. So, and if prisons are not free, then how is it a free? Right? It doesn't make any sense, right? One of many ways that it does not make any sense to call the United States and its allied societies free societies. So I was kind of like thinking about that, and I wanted this video to kind of be somewhat of a meditation on that topic. And so obviously in this image, right, you can see that I'm alluding to several different things. Like one of them is that, the obvious one, maybe the police state. You have an image in the bottom right of, massive police brutality and, militarized police beating up on people, stopping people from doing things, that they would like to be doing. I mean, just in general. I mean, it's just having vast quantities of armed, well-armed, paid people who will hurt you, beat you up, physically stop you, possibly kill you. U.S. also has massive police killings every year. Every year it's growing. Record year was last year, over 1,000 people killed, but many more people brutalized. NYPD, of course, would be the third largest military in the world if it was by funding its alone. It is an entire army. It's the United States and then the China and then NYPD. So that's the police budgets, of course, are only growing and growing, along with military budgets in the United States. And so, and that's one threat that people are always under. Their people's mind. It's not your mind is not physically being beaten by the police necessarily, but you have to always think. I mean, especially if you are a non-white person, especially if you are somebody who is doing something that the people who run the United States, which is to say people who have large quantities of dollars, right, do not like, for example, unionizing, for example, striking, for example, protesting something, racial economic injustice, war against the GNOC word in, the watermelon place. If you're trying to, Black Lives Matter, right? And so that, police are not literally, they're not thought police, although Neofeud 2, my video, cyberpunk dystopian video game, does have literal thought police that are in your mind, because everybody has a cyber mind that's literally being controlled from thousands of miles away, with somebody at the somebody in a mega tech company is just hitting buttons to stop people from thinking things. But I mean, police are not literally inside your brain, right, beating up on your neurons. The police are not getting out their nightsticks and whacking your synapses when you're thinking, hey, let's stop this black family's house being appraised 500,000 times less because of skin color. Hey, let's stop this, billions of dollars going to executives while people are homeless, right? And you're out for whatever action, right? The police aren't beating that. They're not beating your neurons, but they impact what you are thinking, and certainly the actions you can take, which impacts, like, if you like how big how visible and how big actions can get to try to suppress. And they also do they suppress your belief that you can make the changes in the society if they continue to beat down and crush the dissent in the society and nothing changes, right? Like that causes apathy, that causes cynicism, that causes it causes loss of faith that you can make changes in your society, right? And then that itself, right, that doom spiraling, that belief in that the belief that it's a waste of time to even try to change the society. And that's, most of the United States doesn't even vote. They're not happy with the United States. Not saying that would change things, but most people are like, it's not a lot of young people are very active, but huge swaths of the Western world are just completely checked out because they vote, they go to actions, they've done things, and they don't see changes, right? And so the police, but also the government and the lack of change, actually enslaves your mind's imagination of what is possible. So that's another way of reducing, right, the freedom is not just physically brutalizing people out there trying to make changes, but then that on top of the lack of change limits, right? And that's like, so doomerism is actually, I would argue, it's actually ideal for an authoritarian place, like I would argue Western countries like the United States, capitalist countries, because that keeps it keeps the total possibilities of the future, what the future could be like, limited to what the present is, right? It's like Margaret Thatcher, the premier neoliberal Western politician from the late 20th century, once said, there is no alternative. That was her slogan, what she ran. There is no alternative to capitalism. You must, and there's no the system we have right now is the only possible system. Winston Churchill said something very similar. This is not a very good system, but it's better. This is the best system of capitalism. Is the worst system in the world, except for all the alternatives, right? So that's this, number one. There's already an acknowledgement that something is not very right with your free country, but like, there is nothing else. All the other options, right? Socialism, communism, whatever you think that means, and one of the lacks of freedom in the United States and Western countries is that you are not even really allowed to think very much about what those alternatives are, right? Like it's very, I mean, it's hard to explain in the English, which is a Western language. It's hard thing to explain. It's a catch-22 is this divide. It's hard to explain what those alternatives are, like the Matrix, coming back to that, until you actually live in it and see it for yourself. This is the reason why China is actually offering, encouraging people to come from Europe and the United States. You can get a free a visa for, I think, 30 days from many Western countries now, because they're trying to encourage people to just, we can't really explain it to you. Anything we can tell you inside the matrix of the West in the United States. And yes, I'm implying that they're not free. Anything that we can tell you, you're not going to listen to us anyway, for a whole host of reasons, because your mind is not free. As an American, as a European, a Canadian, you're not free. But when you come and you see what the alternatives are being lived out by 4 times the population of the United States, right? That it's like Neo having the it's like when Neo is in the Matrix. I mean, it's a good metaphor for this talk. Also, it's a science fiction dystopian cyberpunk film, so it's up my alley. When Neo comes out of the pod, right? He's in disbelief, like this can't be the way things are. I'm not saying that when he's in the Matrix, you couldn't tell him you're actually inside of this this 1999 world you think you're in is actually just a prison, and it's actually a computer simulation that is sending electrical signals to your neocortex and your amygdala and to your parietal lobe and your occipital lobe. When you're seeing, you know, the when you're seeing the skyscrapers, when you're tasting the noodles in your favorite Chinese noodle shop in Chinatown, not in China, those are electrical signals being sent to your occipital lobe to generate those sights. The flavors of the food is your neurons are being artificially stimulated by your overlords that are using you as a battery in a giant, multi-million person nightmarish pod farm. Piece of you are a piece of meat in a tube of jelly in a pod amongst, an entire farm of pods being farmed for electricity by squid looking tentacled sentient machines that have, anyways. So and the whole world is ecological wasteland, and the sun is not even visible anymore. And you couldn't tell somebody that, right? And it's like but that's not, I'm not saying that that's what, when you leave the United States, that's what it's going to look like. No, it's the opposite. Things get better. But it's like, it's just in the same way that you can't tell somebody, you can't tell somebody whose mind is actually imprisoned what the real world is like, or what it is like to be outside of that prison. You can't explain to Americans and to Western free peoples that are not, what a free society actually is like, or what a different society other than the one that they are in is like, because it is a prison, right? A Western capitalist, liberal democratic society, all in quotes. The words themselves are prison. That's part of the lie. Is the mastery of imprisoning people through eloquent word salad disinformation, and also image and video disinformation. It's called propaganda, and that's one thing that the West is certainly mastered. And so so the thing that actually keeps people unfree in the mind, and by extension unfree in their country, despite themselves calling it free. Right? This is the doublespeak of Orwell, which is paradoxically, the Orwell doublespeak was the West weaponizing language, stories, narrative, science fiction, and then movies as well, because they made a movie in order to imprison people. Right? It's actually language itself, narrative and story and lies, visual, film, radio, TV, publications, newspapers, history books, classrooms, reified throughout, people discussing these ideas and narratives and notions and education to each other, right? That is the prison, right? It's right. The Matrix is a good metaphor, but it doesn't ultimately describe how to keep people's minds unfree, right? It alludes to it metaphorically, but it's really difficult to really describe what is actually happening, because at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to language. It's actually like, that's the one thing the United States excels at, right? It's actually its rival in the global geopolitical competition of China. China excels at producing actual EV. It's the world leading, by far. Even Janet Yellen of the United States Treasury, the capital, the high priestess of capitalism, that is, who runs the central banks of the world, and especially the United States. She even said the mass production of electrical vehicles by China is creating problems for the capacity for the United States and the West to remain at the top, right? So the China is able to produce the best quality of actual concrete things, robotics, 5G, 6G, electricity, renewable technology, high quality development, transportation, also including AI, less so the generative AI, That's very important, actually. But AI in warehouses, transportation, infrastructure, health, whatever you could possibly think of, they excel at, right? Except in production of that that eloquent, not eloquent, but fictional narrative, words, dialogues, journals, articles, right? TV, like I said, right? That the West still excels at that, which is what you need to do to keep people's minds in prison, is to have massive propaganda, consent manufacturing, conditioning, right? Which is, a lot of it is really text. It really is the text. It's the talking, right? And ChatGPT, that's one area that the artificial intelligence, if we have to separate that out, there's many different types of artificial intelligence. As speaking as a programmer who has worked on AI myself, in video games and in other contexts, AI is not China leads in AI, but China does not lead in large language models. It does not lead in human language mimicry, and that it should really be separated out into the generative AI, what's often called generative AI, what OpenAI pushes towards in ChatGPT run by Sam Altman, etc. That is about generating large quantities of that narrative that we're talking about, right? It's generative AI is a mind shackle magnifier. Is another way to think about it, right? Generative AI pumps out 1,000 times faster New York Times articles, Western history books. It's a propaganda multiplier is ultimately what Western generative AI, which is the only AI that is the only place the US leads, right? It's in actually generating human generated word salad narratives, human generated mind shackles, and artificially generated mind shackles. Both the West leads. China is not that good at propaganda. I mean, let's be real. It's not as good. It's maybe that's for good reason, but what, for better or for worse, it is simply not as good, especially not in the English language. But even outside of it, they don't really try to do that. It's like not a thing that they do not emphasize that. They historically and presently, they still don't emphasize that. You are known. I mean, just to give it, this is a little bit off the topic, but you are known in East Asian societies more often than not by your deeds, not by your words, especially China, right? They have a meritocracy. If you're good at cooking, you will know, because when people eat your dim sum or your Sichuan cuisine, when they come to your takeout place, right, on the street, there's no like marketing. Oh, it's the best ever. 9 out of 10 doctors recommend. Juicier. There's no smashed jack. Equivalent. They don't do that. It's just like when you eat it, when you try it, seeing is believing, tasting is believing, right? No one can be told what the Matrix is, and no one can be told that, Mr. Lee's, no one can be told that, Mr. Lee's Gaoji, Mr. Lee's sweet sour pork, and that's Americanized Asian, but no one can be told that, Mr. Yim's cuisine is the best. You just have to try it, and if it is good, then you will know that. And if it is good, then you will tell to other people that by word of mouth, right? People will say, hey, this restaurant in Shanghai is really good, or in Fujian, right? And then people will come. It's very similar in Hawaii as well, right? So and like that's just like how things are. If you're very talented, your talents will show in the meritocracy that we have set up. If you're very good at actually programming Huawei phones, then you will move up. If you're very good at maintaining a society, environment, balancing economic growth with the environment, human needs, reducing strife, then you will move up generally in a Chinese society. And you're known by those deeds in government, in business, in cooking, in technology, right? That's just how that's a multi-thousand-year reality that they live in, right? And so that does actually lend itself, right? While yes, they're not free as necessarily free in the sense of you can start any business and use capital and money in any way and say literally whatever you want at any time. You could say that but you do have a large amount of freedom in both of those things. But you are not it is not like a theoretical unlimited amount of freedom that any individual can have, because freedom is understood also in non-Western societies like China as a thing that is it is a thing that is part of a relational network. It's also in indigenous societies. Like I'm a native Hawaiian, and like we had freedom, but the freedom is balanced with the needs of the community, the human community, and the nature that sustains you, right? You nobody lives outside of the universe and then does what they want, as like this is the way that Aristotle, Plato, the so-called free Roman citizens and the British and Americans have understood freedom. Freedom is my individual right to do whatever I would like to do at the moment, right? And it that itself is nonsensical, right? Because without the parents who have raised you, like the self-made man, right? Without the parents that have raised you, without the people who are doing farming somewhere else to bring the food to your table, and most of the people who call themselves free were not doing that farming. You don't exist. You don't have the freedom to do anything, right? If you starve, right, you don't have the freedom to hike or to swim or to start a business because you're languishing, on the floor, emaciated like a child in Palestine, right? Who also don't have freedom. So the Western freedom is an erasure of the planet, the plants, the ecosystems that need to be sustained, the water, the land, the trees, the humans that do the farming and the medical care and the housework, cooking and cleaning, women, right? They're not free. They're slaves in Greek society and also in modern Western society. So with few exceptions, they're still paid far less and have only recently gained any kind of actual personhood. And half of the West, the conservative half, is trying to roll all that back. So the Western conception of the free mind is the people who are the great enslavers, wealthy, aristocratic, landed, cis, straight, white men, right? It's an absolutely nonsensical paradox. The people who are enslaving everyone else, freedom is when people who are enslaving everyone else have the right to talk to other enslavers, right? Other cis, straight, white, capitalist, landed, Greek, British, Roman, American, French, Spanish men. And they can talk to each other about things they want to talk about. The freedom for them to discuss how awesome it is to live in this society where we enslave everyone. You see how it's ridiculous. It's Thomas Jefferson, what he said, right? Women should not wrinkle their pretty little foreheads with politics. He literally said that as a quote, which it harkens back to this is the freest country in the world. That's the founding father right there. While he had 260 slaves and treated women in that way, right? So the concept of free has never made any sense, but it makes sense that the word free is constantly used in the Western, Anglo-Saxon, Franco, etc. World, capitalist world, because in order to maintain real enslavement, real authoritarianism requires a preponderance of nonsensical, mind shackling language. And this is why the United States, the West, excels at propaganda, and then the technological advancements that propel that forward, right, are things like ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, high-speed generated nonsensical propaganda, right, based upon previously existing propaganda. And that's the only place that U.S. excels at. Not in quantum computing, the Chinese quantum supercomputer. They have quantum entanglement, digital encryption that's literally unbreakable. They have their artificial suns, nuclear fusion. They're capable of sustaining, with they're capable of sustaining 100 million degree fusion reactions for 20 minutes plus, and it's only growing. They're breaking all of the boundaries in that. In any field, you seriously, the 25%, there's 25% more white papers are published by China every year, and the gap is widening. Most of the United States actual preeminent technological breakthroughs, all of the science, tech, engineering, mathematics people are all either in the 90s. They're all like, a lot of them were ex-Soviet Union during the end of the Cold War. They're ex-Soviet Union scientists. Now it's all Chinese and Indians, and less Chinese, because they're all Communist Party of China spies, according to the free country, right? That's another one of these nonsensical language-based, lie-filled word salad lies, and that has to be pumped out, right? Which is the Chinese are all spying on you. Every time there's somebody Asian inside of your university or in your Silicon Valley, it's a spy. This is all lies, but that has to be propagated in order to attempt to maintain enslavement of the world under an imperialist, colonialist, capitalist system. So not gonna work, but I mean, they're trying. So and so anyways, so like this the concept of so the places that have the most talking, especially of a particular subgroup of people. These people talk, and everyone has to listen. This is why they don't like the DEI and the woke and black and brown and global South and marginalized people and women talking, right? Because when those people talk, the truth comes out, and then that starts to destroy the actual matrix prison that is this white, straight, patriarchal, capitalist, etc. Hierarchical mass mind gulag, the gulag of the mind, the forced labor camp of the mind that is the Western world, where you work 8-12 hours a day to barely afford your house and your rent and your food and call yourself free. I mean, that is the real unfreedom. That's the only real unfreedom there has ever really been. And then then all the movies are about how horrible it would be that some authoritarian dictator in this Asian country or Africa or in this Latin American place is in charge. And thank God, it's really those movies and those news reports about how authoritarian it is that there's a forced labor over there. It's not really about that place. It's really about telling people inside the real prison, the United States, that you should be happy to be in there, right? As Winston Churchill, Tina Thatcher, and the many great philosophers and thinkers said, right? Our system is not that good. In fact, it's terrible, but it's better than all those other ones, right? So that is the real, the prison, the wall of the prison is the fictional Truman Show Potemkin capitalist apartheid wall around the West, right? And on this wall are posted pictures of grayscale, black and white, sad photographs of Russians, and this grayscale North Koreans are the children eat the rats, and then the rats eat the children, as Myeonmi Park would say, right? With $200,000 worth of plastic surgery on her face. Like, and her cheeks looked like they're about to, her cheeks look like they were like rendered by generative AI, consuming vast quantities of Reddit porn. And because that's who she's talking to, is Western Reddit guys who have to work for the U.S. military and, tech companies. And so like, you have to see that and go, oh my God, thank God I'm not over there in North Korea. Because, oh my God, it's like their children eat rats. The children push the trains push the children around. That's just horrible. It's like, right? And you look, what's in Africa? Oh, everyone's just. I mean, there is suffering in Africa due to Western capitalist colonialism. Oh my God, it's all horrible. And what would be worse if the Chinese show up there? It will make it even worse because, the U.S. and Europe have never done anything bad in Africa, and so. Right, but and so and like, oh, what's happening in oh my God, in China there's an authoritarian regime where nobody can walk down the street without getting 25,000 credit checks, and the Uyghurs are having 6 IUDs inserted per girl per day. That's a literal statistic from Adrian Zenz, by the way. Professional Western mind shackle producer, cited by the New York Times, CNN, left, right, and center Western media, by the way. Oh my gosh, we're so lucky that we're in America, right? So the shackle is, it really is, the shackles are not the prison walls, although the United States and the West do use prison walls for sure. But the majority of the population is not. 2.5 million. 2.5 million is a lot of people in American prison. This is the freest country in the world. But the 337 million. U.S. population is currently 340 million, approximately. 337 million people are not literally inside of prison walls or in shackles, right? On a chain gang of black people, right? With a white prison guard loading them off a bus to put out record-breaking California wildfires. That's how the United. I mean, there are slaves like that. There are unfree literal slaves, not mind slaves, like physically enslaved peoples in the United States. The U.S. also installed slavery into Libya. Speaking of the great things America did to Africa, bombing a rapidly advancing, economically moving forward, and socialist path aimed Libyan country that had universal healthcare, universal college education, and free, nice new apartments for young couples. The United States bombed that country in the Stone Age, and then they now have slave markets in Libya. So that's what the U.S. did to Africa, right? So I mean, literally enchaining Africa as well in that sense. I mean, enchaining entire continents, in not mental chains, but in literal physical poverty, the unfreedom of suffering in poverty, of suffering in colonial control, and of course, how can you be free when you're being bombed in your village? I don't know, like a little Palestinian child. It's hard to be free when your bones are showing, and when you go to get the flour to put a few calories into your Palestinian body, your U.S. military and the U.S.-backed Israelis snipe you and kill your little children when they're trying to get flour, right? So I don't know how free that is, right? Like, again, there's never been, it's what is this word even for, right? What is the word even for, really? It's just nonsensical. Most Western words are, though. But they are by design. They have to be nonsensical. There has to be a constant cognitive dissonance, because of the place you're living in is not a free place. Your mind is not in a free state. Your mind is controlled by many things. Economically, direct physical violence with the police state. That's what the dollars are there for. If you start thinking outside of the acceptable Overton window, you lose your job. You don't get tenure. That's why other college professors are not out for Palestine. That's why you can't join too many leftist organizations, or say too many things, or your LinkedIn work that gives you the tech, finance, insurance, real estate job that pays gainful employment. You lose that job. So the economic incentives limit your thinking. The direct physical violence backed by the U.S. Western actually authoritarian police state governments, those limit what's possible. When you vote in elections and you try to go through proper channels and the court system, and you see nothing changes, that limits, that imprisons you, and it goes, well, nothing can change. We have to just stick with this and not try to build something better, like some kind, like socialism. Just not our country just doing constant genocide. We just have to do genocide because that's just what happens. We do genocide and we pretend like we don't, right? We keep open air prisons like Gaza open by backing Israel with billions of dollars in weapons. So we build the biggest prisons and we make planetary prisons like Gaza, and then we call ourselves free. And that's just what we have to just be cognitively dissonant and resigned to being nonsensical survivors in this wasteland, right? I was talking about Fallout last time, and so that the mentality of like everything is bad, sucks, is wrong, is BS. All of our leaders are corrupt and horrible. Everyone who runs everything is a horrible person. But that's just like how the world is. That's how humans are. That's also colonial Western BS as well. Speaking as an indigenous person who's not from that kind of society, that's who we were as Native Hawaiians in a prosperous place where everyone had their needs met and the leaders were actually, by and large, actually not corrupted, horrible individuals constantly lying to everyone. That's actually how most of the world has lived historically prior to the colonial era, which was the West going around and ruining everything. But so the ability to, it's you can't really describe. It's hard to describe to somebody who lives in that. Right, it's hard to describe something to somebody who lives in an actually unfree place because their mind is also trained to reject the alternate narrative, right? Like a cult. I mean, like the West has smaller subcults within it. Like, if you go to Waco, Texas was the had a deadly end to one of their sub mini cults, right? Jehovah's Witnesses, they're like the Mormons. There's the Quiverful, like Wingnut, like unhinged lunatic conspiracy people, like far right Christians, right? These are like the sub cults, the silent Scientology. These are the cults that like have echo chambers, and anyone who is told anything different, they're taught to shun outsiders. There's all these the liberal, the big cult runners, right, which is the entire West. They have studies they have like articles in the New York Times about their sub cults, right? And actually, the way they describe their subcults is actually the way, to a large extent, that their bigger cults work. Except it's just on a much grander scale, right? And so in the same way that, like, the conservative has a reaction, the conservative person in the red state, in the red area or whatever, has a far-right Christian has a reaction. Well, you're a brainwashed liberal elite, and I'm not going to listen to you because, you want to inject Bill Gates microchip into me with that vaccine, and that's why I'm not going to hospital and getting any, right? And you're a corrupt, fallen degenerate, and I can't listen to you, right? Because you are just you are brainwashed New Yorker, or whatever it is, right? And I'm not, and your diversity, equity, and inclusion is destroying America. Whatever the narrative is, right? There's just kind of like there's an automatic antibody system of the unfree mind that like just attacks and rejects everything outside of it at face value. And any unfree place like that, even sub unfree places in the greater unfree Western world has to have a wall. It's the Potemkin other wall. It's like it's the propaganda around it that stops you from ever actually seeing, right? Leaving, because if you actually leave a conservative Christian community, let's say you were raised in Mississippi in a very, very weird cult that, like, Holly was, my partner was raised in one of these, where it's like you were not allowed to read certain books. You couldn't even read Harry Potter. You can't play tarot cards. You can't, look, you can't read anything outside the Bible in some of these cults. In our specific Bible, right? And a lot of Americans know that experience. It's like half of the United States is basically pissed off goth alt, programmer, tech people. A lot of the liberal world is people who left their conservative, especially in the 80s and 90s, people who left their conservative Christian families and then fled to the coasts, right, to the blue areas, and then live their lives out there as technologists or lawyers or etc. And they are have a chip on their shoulder for all their they were horrible experiences growing up in the conservative subcult in the greater Western cult, right? The liberals run the greater planetary capitalist imperialist cult, especially nowadays, and usually historically they tend to run it because they're a bit smarter. Because they're not as limited. I mean, they are still limited, but they're not as limited as the conservative subcult. It's like a matryoshka doll of cults in the West, and of mind prisons, of unfreedom. But in the same way that like the liberal has to put a wall of China is destroying the world by ending landlords' ability to collect rents at what cost, and oh my God, we have China created COVID-19 in a Wuhan lab, and a wet bat eating spread that to everyone, and oh my gosh, in communist China, where everyone is still living in the 1960s central humiliation style poverty, and being beaten. The Chinese are all being beaten every second of the day by brutal Xi Jinping police. Never mind the fact that that's actually not what's happening there. It's the U.S. is spending, again, just one city in the United States spends more money than the Chinese military, and the Chinese police is smaller than that. The whole 1.4 billion country, one state in the United States spends more money on their beating up people, the police, than the entire country of China's military. Not their police, their military. Anyway, the reality is in China. I can't. But again, I can't tell you that. You'd have to just go there. Like the Matrix, you have to leave the U.S. Matrix and discover what the real world actually is. Take a trip. I recommend anybody, if you can, and you don't crash on a Boeing plane. Gotta watch out for those. The engines are on fire now. You're unfree because you can't get on a plane without a piece of a mal-inserted door due to capitalist lies and self-brainwashing to believe that tech and data makes plane companies rather than actual physical planes. That's actually a very important topic, right? It's actually part of that, right? And so you might not have the freedom to even leave the United States, right? It's like Neo trying to get, imagine Neo trying to get picked up by the Nebuchadnezzar, but like the pod, like Boeing made Neo's pod ejection emergency exit. So when they go to hit Neo's, like, if the US made the Matrix, it's like even to get out of the Matrix, because they had a bunch of MBAs, crypto NFT bro capitalist clowns running the pod manufacturing. The pods are manufactured by people who put sawdust and broken pieces of plastic and titanium shavings into the Matrix pod eject door. And so now when they go to hit the eject Neo out of the Matrix, it doesn't open, right? And like on the Boeing planes, it's the opposite. The emergency exits just explode off the planes, hit the engine, and then your plane is on fire. And then half of the people in the plane smash their head against the ceiling and have concussions and injuries, like that plane that was just flying out of South America, right? But it's a similar thing where it's like, I don't know if you'll even be able to leave America soon. But that's how they'll trap you in there, right? It's just you physically can't leave because all the Boeing planes will crash. China is like, please come and visit so you can see what a civilization that actually functions in a working society is like. And America's like, no, you can't leave because we're gonna make all of our Boeing planes out of Mountain Dew cans with RC car motors attached to the propellers. And we'll shoot all the whistleblowers that tell people that, by the way. Kind of like how they killed John Bartlett. Everyone's really cool with American corporations just like killing, workers that are trying to tell the truth. What a free country you live in. This is the Boeing whistleblower who is telling the truth about the massive criminal malfeasance at the company. Anyway, so let me come back. So I kind of went in many directions at once. So how free is your mind though? How free is your mind? I mean, and of course I'm not going to tell you how free. You You have free will. Remember, Neo. Eat a cookie. After that, you'll feel right as rain. All that stuff about you live in a mass propagandized, disinformation-based, and mass violence-based colonial capitalist multi-thousand-year nightmare experiment called the Western world, and all that stuff that Silver Spook just said, it's all gonna go away once you eat this cookie. Just eat this cookie, and then you'll remember you don't believe in all of that fake crap, and you have free will. You don't have to listen to what the unfree peoples of the non-white world have to say. Right? Just stop watching this video, and then you're free again. Remember? You'll be fine. I mean, like, I know a lot of people will. Once I say China, like, half the audience leaves. Right? Once I say somewhere that's like, once I even mention, I can watch it happening in real time. I can watch the viewer counts drop. I can watch people like unsubscribing and leaving my Twitter. Once I mention a place that has a U.S. plastered New York Times, Guardian, left, right, and center media, movies like Red Dawn. It was supposed to be about China, but they made the new one is supposed to be about China, but they made it about North Korea because the Hollywood realized that they wouldn't make enough money selling. They would have lost too much money selling the anti-China Red Dawn movie starring. The new one starring Mr. Thor, Mr. Chris Hemsworth. I don't know if you've seen it. They changed it to North Korea at the last moment. They actually had to CG over all of the China flags with North Korea flags, and all the soldiers' insignias with North Korean insignias, because they're like, oh crap, actually we're not going to make any money if we insult China too directly, and then they don't sell them. If they don't make a Chinese release of Red Dawn, we're going to lose like huge amounts of our market. Anyway. So, but when I talk about a place that's outside of the West as a place that is like it's like talking to a conservative in a far right church somewhere on the outskirts of Kansas, in the deep South, or like somewhere in the deep Canada, like where Holly's from, right? It's like telling somebody in a church where they think that snake bites will put the Jesus back in you, right? About what New York City is like, or what the non-conservative Christian cult is like, right? But it's like that for all of the United States and all of the West when you talk about places outside of that, like much of Asia, Africa, Latin America, right? And people just like reject it and they just like leave. And so I can't really push too hard on that, because it actually that is the propaganda working, where people just like I don't believe you, I'm not listening to you because you must be an agent of the CCP. Like, I'm not gonna read Holly's links that we have of actual cited evidence of the things we're talking about. I'm just gonna like leave, because what I know is true, because I am a smart person, because I have a college education from a Western university. And like, you can't be right, because I have seen and heard too many. Like, where did you see and hear the thing from? Right. But that is the shackles on your mind. Those are the prison walls of your mind, reflecting your thoughts back into the Western colonial capitalist, etc. world. Right. In the same way that those people outside of my, Duggars, where we have 20, each women have to just pump out 20 kids. Me and my 20 sister wives club, or me and my 15, daily child floggings, women are property, cult, where we read our daddy's version of the Bible. If we leave our daddy's little village, right, or our Amish little town, if we go out, everything out there is wrong and bad. Like, everything out there is wrong and bad. And if somebody comes by, like, there's like, don't shun them, don't listen to them. They're trying to trick you into leaving our great little thing we have here, right? Where daddy is doing all kind of nasty things to the little children, right? And it keeps his wife, hits his wife and makes her do all the work, and the children are like slaving away while daddy does whatever daddy wants, but the daddy in a conservative Christian household who's extorting the labor of the children and the wife, like the Greeks had. The difference between the Greeks and the conservative Christian is the Greeks had Afro-Asiatic basically non-white people in the field instead of the children. But in the United States, in the beginning, now eventually Americans got themselves, like the Greeks, Afro-Asiatics, mostly Africans, on the stolen indigenous land that was America. But the wife was very similar to the Greek wife, which is doing all the cooking and the cleaning, and a sexual slave. But the same with the conservative Western household, right, is the father taking advantage of slaves if he can get them. Nowadays, like under the table illegal immigrants or illegal immigrants, oppressed global South, Hispanic and indigenous and labor, basically. Daddy is taking advantage of them. But if it's a smaller conservative cult, it might just be the children and the wife, right? But in the same way that the father controls what books his wife and children can read, what TV they can watch, their interaction with the world outside of their little bubble, their little matrix, right? For his it benefits him, right? To have a subservient wife, right? Go back, return with a V to the trad. That's what all the trad wife videos are, right? Like, go back and let's just churn butter and listen to our husbands and not think anymore. Just like Thomas Jefferson said. Women should not think. Women should wrinkle their pretty foreheads with politics. They should not think. Right? He ordered Thomas Jefferson, the most freest person to have ever lived, the author of the Constitution of the United States, the greatest, freest country in the world, ordered women to be slaves. And also he ordered his 260 slaves that he had whipped and flogged and beaten and fed and kept like pigs in a pigsty, and called them stinky because they were genetically stinky, not because Thomas Jefferson kept his black slaves with farm animals and didn't let them take showers. Right? This is a very free mind, right? The freest person in the entire galaxy, Thomas Jefferson, who ordered half of the planet to never think. Very free place. He ordered women. So it is nonsense, absolute nonsense, right? But you have to, and a woman, if you're inside of a conservative Christian cult, you'd be like, this seems really not fair, as the wife or as the daughter of this, child beating, wife beating guy who doesn't let us think and doesn't let us read and doesn't let us change our hair from a way that he wants it to be. It doesn't let us change our women's clothes. He wants us to wear these long skirts and have our hair down or have it up. And if we change it, then he'll get mad and say that the Bible, Jesus Christ said that you can't do that. The Bible said, top not come down, and that's why you have to keep your bun up there, right? Which is obviously how they literally had. There was a pastor, not even in a conservative Christian, like a tiny little cult. Like this was a church in Canada that said that. The guy just went on the pastor went on a whole tirade about that. He went on a whole lecture about that, right? And that's what the Bible means, right? And and that's all nonsense. But you can think, oh, this doesn't seem right. But just like Winston Churchill and just like Margaret Thatcher, right? There is no alternative to capitalism, Western liberal capitalism. But so the conservative Christian husband will say there is no alternative to doing what Christian daddy said. It's the same, actually. It's the same exact. That's why the conservative world is a subcult within the greater liberal Western, greater overcult that maintains global hegemony, or tries to, failing now, to maintain a global prison. Right? It is the same mechanism, right? It's not like at any time the woman and the children, technically they could leave. I mean, most of the time, sometimes an abusive father in a conservative Christian household may chain children. I'm not going to say they don't. They obviously do sometimes. Chain the wife, chain children up in the house. Keep the doors locked, hold this like financial enslavement, like keeping holding the dollars. I mean, the West formerly had women financially basically enslaved by banning them from getting a credit card, a bank account, and basically having any access to money, so that the husband could control them. And this is literally in the 20th century, mid to late, past in the mid up towards the late 20th century. Only finally did women even have an option. Not that they have it yet, but they had only after like the 50s the women even start getting, like, if you look at, like, I was watching, Holly and I were watching the strange was it Day the Earth Stood Still, and like, this is a 1950s movie, and women who didn't have husbands, like the main character is a woman who is in a house waiting to find a man to pay for her life, right? Because that was the norm. You needed, you were basically expected to be enshackled to a man. You would not be able to have a house and pay for the food and pay for your clothes and pay for your amenities and your electricity and all those things without the man. And it was just the norm of society that you have to find a man to own you. And here's a place you can stay while you're in this unfortunate, it's also deeply stigmatized state of being a non-free, the stigmatized state of being a single woman of a certain age. And that's very disgraceful, right? Like, it's like you should really have a man that you are cooking and cleaning for, as is what is right and good and free and just, right? And that was the norm in the so-called free world, right? And it really most of the Western world wants to go back there. That's why the gender, the fight in the 2010s and the gender gaps, right? The women are not dating men. Like 70% of cis straight men are single, and women are, by and large, women and non-men and non-binary and queer people are basically like dating each other, living in their houses. That statistically, this is what's happening, right? I talk about this a lot in previous streams. In the West, it's very important. The same thing is not necessarily happening in China, even between North Korea and South Korea. South Korea is having a really huge gender. South Korea is the westernized part of Korea. It's the westernized half of Korea. And they're having real serious, women are not wanting to get married and have, they view it as, there is a real historical reason for that, by the way, as well. 25% of the country under U.S. Occupation was forced into prostitution, including children and women were forced into prostitution to accumulate vast quantities of capital to kickstart the capitalist South Korean economy. And women, but that that westernization has resulted in a more patriarchal society, and all of the Western world is going through these throes of like, why are women not dating men? Why are there this deep divides between these genders? Well, I mean, the divide is the 50% of the Western world that has always been enshackled, going all the way back again to Aristotle, right? The patriarchy that has enshackled 50% of the people as not free, that as I said, just didn't even have the ability to own a bank account until the late 20th century, right? And only now are really pushing for the real rights and the real freedom, right? And that is the beginning of the rebellion in the unfree, mind-shackled prison of the West, right? That is the beginning of the rebellion. The prison break is not like the women are shattering the walls on their houses, trying to bend like Wonder Woman or She-Hulk. They're not trying to bend literal, 2-inch thick iron bars on the prisons of their households that their husbands are trying to keep locked. But they are mentally, financially, right? This is why you can't learn any woke, and DEI is the biggest topic, right? Because this is, to be honest, like, not to be honest, like, to be real, the end of the patriarchy will be the death of the West. This is a big part of it. That's not the only part. That's a major part, though. It's really a big thing that's leading. It's women, especially like women of color and queer people, which non-men, that are really leading the breakout of the Western prison. Even the dudes, like, just another example. This week there was that I don't know if you saw this. Olayemi Olurin had this who is a black woman, had a she was a black woman lawyer from New York who gave what some people are calling like the greatest takedown, the greatest you know, interview criticizing the black man mayor of New York, who is also a sellout to the United States and the racist capitalist world. But it's important that it's two black people, but one is a man and one is a woman, and one is siding with the United States, the police state, the unfreedom. Mayor Adams talking about we need to just fund more police. All the homeless people, disabled people, just all need to be locked up. Homeless people are disabled people and they're mentally ill. They're all mentally ill and they all need to be locked up. And you know, and then the other side is saying maybe we don't all need to be in prison though, actually, and maybe like we should care about actually giving people their material, making sure people's material needs are met, and give people healthcare and mental health care assistance. And then you have the other side, right? And this is something that's very much, you know, I think that the fact that it is a woman, I mean, they're both black, but one is a woman. That's showing where there's a huge divide between all races, women and men in the Western world, right? And this is all in the diaspora. Like things are different in other places, right? Things are different in other parts of the world. But in the Western world, and a lot of that is because the Western, not to say that there's not zero patriarchy outside of the Western world, but like it is deeply and very old and very strong in the Western world, and it is also the capitalist and the colonialist world, and they all intersect. And anyways, but coming back to the point, I know this is not necessarily a gender discussion, but those are all factors into why things are happening the way that they are, right? And so because I mean, you may have slaves or you may not have slaves, right? You may live around a black non-white community in the West, in the US or Europe, or you may not. A lot of Europe doesn't live anywhere near a lot of people of color, you know, and that's its own kind of problem, and it creates a very insular society, or it just has always been one. And then you know, but you cannot not live around half of the planet's population that's women. Like any society, anywhere, you're going to have some women around. I mean, it's going to be a fact of life, right? If you're in a white majority area, if you're in a black majority area, if you're in a brown, if you're in an Asian area, you know, you're going to have women around. And so the women are always going to be in that direct conflict of the men in this patriarchal society trying to keep them in their place, trying to keep them unfree in their mind, trying to make sure that they don't put on too much green hair dye and change their appearance to put too much eye makeup on, or not enough eye or face makeup on. Make sure the women don't figure out that they don't have to be with a man and they can be happy single, or women could be happy with another woman. A woman could be happy with like a non-man or queer person or 3 or 4 other people, or you know, however they want, right? Women could be happy as engineers and scientists, not with a guy. So the men have to, in an unfree place like the West, the men have to keep 50%. That's a lot of people. 50% in a controlled state. That's why Aristotle and Jefferson, right? Greeks, Americans, Brits, etc. They've always had to keep the patriarchy had to constantly be reiterated and reified, and you know, again, propagandized and, you know, conditioned into the population with this nonsense. We're the freest place, except you have to cook and clean and do what I say. You know, do what I say, not as I do, right? You know, you have to be. We're the freest place, except never mind all the black slaves that I have and all the women. You know, and so like every Western unfree society has to constantly, as I like to keep bringing up, is living in constant cognitive dissonance. Your brain is literally being rewired to have to deal with inconsistencies of what is being said and what is being done, and then the inconsistencies. A lot of energy has to be spent, like all that police violence, right? All of the beating, all of these fights and arguments. You have to constantly be having fights and arguments and shouting down. Or like sometimes a white man will pull out his thesaurus and start talking like, well, you see, put the toga on and be like, as my great white, when a woman says, well, I think that, I think that when women, people should be allowed to dress however they like. Well, you see, as Aristotle once said in his Sesquipedalian, great and ancestral wisdom, big words, big words, big words, big words, big words, big words, big words. And just if you say enough big words, you can gaslight and just kind of like, and smallify, again, which is, it's just word salad, right? Again, it is eloquent nonsense. It is conditioning its narrative in the same way that the New York Times article about why we have to go to war with Russia or China or both is a bunch of eloquent nonsense to keep people afraid of looking outside of their own Overton window, push the military-industrial complex. And so when the guy is, it's a similar kind of thing where they have to kind of go into this mode, and I went and read some Aristotle. I don't know if I did it on I think I did it on a Twitch, and it's nonsensical. I was actually reading his work. He's a very boring writer. He repeats himself and he waffles, and it's inconsistent because Aristotle justifies the enslavement of women and Afro-Asiatic people, non-white people. He uses there's biological nonsensical arguments like, You see the Arab and the Asiatic peoples. They're lower. They are predestined to be lower to the ground. Look at the arc of the back. It's like the modern phrenology. The thing is, Western thinking is all phrenology. It's all phrenology. It is surface level, seemingly scientific, with vast quantities of big words propagating through them, but ultimately nonsense. In the same way that when Jefferson said, well, African people are naturally designed to be slaves, there's actually a mental health disorder, did you know this, that the Western medical community came up with. Speaking of mental illness, homelessness, poverty, and racism together, there was a mental illness for African slaves trying to escape slavery. It was called drapetomania in 1851. Okay, so but that is part of the Western phrenology, which is to say word salad, nonsensical, illegitimate, malicious narratives, right? Like China's destroying the world by making solar panels. Wait, again, right? So immediately you're saying, wait. If you think about that for a little bit. Wait. So Aristotle, you're saying that women are just predisposed to be subservient to men because they have lesser minds? How do you decide that as a man that they have lesser minds? Thomas Jefferson, when you say that women should not wrinkle their pretty foreheads with politics, that kind of seems like it's just your opinion, because if you claim to live in a free society, don't you think everyone should be allowed to think and vouch for their own political, their own best interests? Why is half the population not free in your so-called free society? Like what is the real justification for that? Thomas Jefferson, right? White people in the United States, educated white people in the United States in the mental professions, people with MD degrees from accredited American universities, American Medical Association. What exactly? Why is it a mental illness, right? Like, okay, we have bipolar disorders. People can have dementia. They forgot. Like a lot of people have that now because they got 6 rounds of COVID, and it causes your brain to omeletify its neurons together. Okay, so some people do have, we can say, mental illnesses. Depression can be, a kind of a pathology. But when you say that black people trying to not be whipped and bound and forced to do horrible toil and labor in their cotton field, and then live inside of the animal in filthy conditions with the animals eating rotten cabbage, you're saying that when people don't want to live in slavery, that is mental illness. But you see, Aristotle had exactly the same thing. I'll bring that up right now. And then it's like well, okay, except for like straight up just this does not. This, I mean, if you think about it a little bit, it does not compute, right? And it doesn't because it's nonsense. All right, it's nonsense. It's a normal and extremely intense desire for any person that is being massively maltreated to want to leave. This is why the Palestinian resistance is like that's just a normal response. Like black people revolted, like in Haiti. And by the way, the United States and the West is all sending as many money and guards and arms, and they're also propagandizing their own people. That Haiti is full of these evil gangs. That what happened when the United States isn't in control of countries that have revolutions that throw off the shackles of slavery and racism. But you see, but the Western brain, like you can feel it. I'm sure you can. If you speak English, you can feel it in your brain where there's something in your mind that's telling you, wait. Okay, it's a black country. It's got to be run by authoritarians and gangs. That sounds normal, but wait, but you know, yeah, they did have a revolution, and yeah, they should have freedom, right? They shouldn't be subservient to Western neo-colonial corporations and banks and you know, yeah, I mean, like to be a slave, like, you know, that's really bad though. You know, that's really bad. Like, I think people should want to get it. Oh, but the, you know, the scientific and medical community, they're really smart though. And they're telling me that, you know, mental illness is when you try to escape slavery. It's like trying to protect people from mass disabling, mass killing pandemics is mental illness. That's what the BBC TV shows are now saying, right? I've predicted it's going to happen any second now. There's going to be an official clinical pathologization, an official medical description for the mental illness of people who wear masks, right, to filter out aerosolized COVID and other pathogens from the air. I guarantee you it's happening. It's going to be the drapetomania of the COVID pandemic. It's going to be called like respiratomania. It's where you wear respirators. Right? It's going to be maskomania. Right? It's the pathologization of people trying to protect people. Right? Again, that's going to be another layer of Western cognitive slave shackle brain. Right? I guarantee it's coming. So, where's my? I have this one document that he put out there. Where is it? Is it politics? Or actually, yeah. Actually, well, if I go into this, I might get too intense, but we'll just try it a bit. So, this is just a little bit of Aristotle for you. The greatest, freest mind, except for Thomas Jefferson ever. Right? This is part of the classics which you have to learn in Western liberal school now. They're going back to the Veritas. They're going to the Veritas liberal educational curriculum, which is forced memorization of Aristotle, Plato, and the classics, antiquities, Western antiquities. So let's just read a little bit. Slavery and slave are ambiguous, for there is no such thing as a slave or a man that is in slavery by law, for the law is a sort of agreement under which the things conquered in the war are said to belong to their conquerors. Now this conventional right is arraigned by many jurists as a statesman is impeached for proposing an unconstitutional measure. They say that it is monstrous if the person powerful enough to use force and superior power is to have the victim of his force as his slave and subject. And even among the learned, some hold this view, though some hold the other. So what Aristotle was saying there is basically nothing. He's basically saying nothing. He's spending too many words. But what he's trying to do is justify slavery and appease the ruling class of Greece, which was a white oligarchic aristocracy. And it's nonsense. It's also malicious. Okay? And this is the great leader of the Western world. Is a guy who let me just read a little bit more. Okay, so this is where it comes when it comes to gender. This is Aristotle, okay? As again, between the sexes, the male is by nature superior and the female inferior. The male ruler and female subject. And the same must necessarily apply in the case of mankind as a whole. Therefore, all men that differ as widely as the soul does from the body and the human being from the lower animal. And in this condition of those whose function is the use of the body, and from whom this is the best that is forthcoming. These are by nature slaves, for whom to be governed by this. Number one, these sentences are just muddled. This is just boring. It's just badly written. There's way too much unnecessary parenthetical, like reiterations of things you've already said. I think the reason why Aristotle is doing this is because, well, I mean, I don't know why. To be honest, I don't know why, but I think it's because there's a general tendency to just being a bad writer, but also like writing in ways that are unnecessarily unnecessarily sesquipedalian, which means like overuse of very large, long, confusing words. Basically, what that means. To have a Byzantine, that's another sesquipedalian thing. I mean, I was trained by the Western Ivy League feeder schools, so you will forgive me. But it's like there's a tendency to have a unnecessary amount of very complicated sentences. Now, it's not necessarily bad to use precise or complicated language if you're describing something that actually is complicated. If you are trying to describe, right, the function of neutrons being fired into uranium-235, unstable uranium-235 atoms, thereby initiating fission and the process of the thermonuclear explosions that occur in a fat boy, a little man. There's some things. If you're talking about quantum computing, if you're talking about how the blood-brain barrier is permeable by very few things like caffeine and alcohol, and but that the COVID-19 virus can pass through that and then degrade the myelin sheaths on the axons, which causes disruption to the symphony of electromagnetic signals in the brain, on top of microclotting and thrombosis, which causes series of a storm of strokes within the brain. I mean, when you're talking about medical terminology, when you're trying to describe things that are actually complex, right? It can be necessary to use. Complex terminology, right? And you might need to have more complicated descriptions, but when you're describing the enslavement of, when you're describing the unequal treatment of certain races of people, when you're describing the unequal enslavement of women, right? These are not things that are complicated, right? It's kind of like a lot of people have pointed out, right? Committing mass genocide. This is not complicated. What's happening in Palestine? It's horrific. It's malicious. It's disgusting. It's not complicated, right? But again, this comes back to this is where Aristotle oppressing the Afro-Asiatic peoples and women, the conservative Christian man in Mississippi oppressing his wife and his children, right? And the United States Empire oppressing the Palestinians through Israel. They have the same technique, right? You can't understand Palestine. It's too complex an issue, right? It's a multi-thousand-year geopolitical, religious, historical, religious conflict between Jews and Muslims, and you can't understand that because you are a simple, lowly, common citizen of the Western world, right? Wife and children, you are too simple to understand that my beating you as a conservative, right-wing, quiverful Christian in Mississippi. You can't understand. It's too complex. I am the man. I understand the world. You have to take my beatings. Wife, you have to give me fellatio and cook and clean and do what I say. With children, you do what I say or I beat you, because it's too complex for you to understand the world, right? And similarly, women, Greek women and oppressed laborers slaving away under Aristotle and the Greeks in our olives fields, making our food for us and harvesting and doing the mining. Oppressed laborers, oppressed non-white laborers of Greece, and oppressed women of Greece. It's too complex for you. You should not wrinkle your head, right? Thomas Jefferson. It's too complex for women to understand American civil society. It's too the Constitution, what it means to be a free political entity, is too complex for all of the 50% of America to understand, and all of the non-American black slaves is too complex for you to understand. Slaves are bestial, subhuman entities. They are not capable of thinking. Women are lesser entities. They're not capable of thinking. It's too complex. So you see, actually, like, that's the crux. That's really the crux of where a lot of the shackles of the unfree, misinformation-based mass. That's why. So you see, like, it's argument from eloquence. It's argument from I'm smarter because I can use bigger words than you, or I'm smarter because I sound smarter than you, right? Shorthand for that is I'm more Britisher than you. That's like when you watch a movie. Like I was playing Fallout. It's like the smarter mutants, they get Britisher and Britisher accents, which is to say imperialister and assholier and actually stupider accents. It's argument from I'm a tall guy. Aristotle argued that because Africans, many of them are actually taller than Greeks, historically, right? But Aristotle argued because their bodies are naturally low to the ground, it's argument from my stature, argument from posture. Shoulders back, chin up, chest out. I'm smarter than you. I am deemed capable of rational thought because I stand up good. That's literally Aristotle uses that. The British have historically used that. I am but you see, all of this is the same thing. It's too complex for you, right? It's all gaslighting. It's all a prison of self-hatred, lying, disinformation, and nonsense, backed by nonsense. It's not complex at all. It's not complex. There are complex things. That's not complex. Derive it. Figuring how to make 100 million degree temperature, 20-minute long, tokamak magnetoplasma, fusion reactions. Making an artificial sun, that's complicated. Not oppressing women, people of color, other ethnicities and races, and your own children and wife. Stopping committing genocide in Palestine because that's really horrible. That's not complicated, actually. It's very, very simple. Very simple, right? Very simple. But this is the trick of this is the mind prison of the West. Now the trick is how to get all of those. The majority of people are not cis white straight landed aristocratic men. In Greece, in Britain, in the United States, historically today, right? The majority of the world isn't a European, right? The trick has always, if the rest of the world said, you know what, we're over these European colonizers for real though. We're all uniting against these people. We're all coming, right? You know what? We're all Americans. We're all over this capitalist system. We're over this. If everybody simultaneously got together, the women are like, you know what? We're over these men. That's it. No more sex. No more free labor. You cook, you clean, you do all the 50% of human labor that's carrying work. Okay. See if you can invent E equals MC squared without your wife doing all that extra work and not getting credit for science work too. Just see if you can. If women, the colonized world, the non-white world, at any time they said, you know what, we're over this, they could free themselves, right? And if the working classes said, hey, you know what, we're over this, they could free themselves. The trick is, how do you stop people from freeing themselves? I mean, this is the trick of the capitalist system. This is the trick of the patriarchal system. This is the trick of the slave system. This is the trick of the Greek system. This is the trick of the Roman system. This is the trick of the British and the French and the American system and the global imperialist system, right? How do we trick people into doing obvious, very simple, obvious things that are the most right things in the world, like ending all those systems, racism, colorism, capitalism, patriarchy? Beat it out of them. Gaslight them, brainwash them, have a fake meritocratic system of degrees that say I have a better degree than you, that tells you that I can tell you how to think, which is to say that I have the political education that tells you how to think, and if that doesn't work, here's a system of economic incentives that will say, well, if I pay you enough money, then you'll stop thinking those things, and You'll stop saying, even you can think that in your head maybe, but if you say it out loud, you lose your job. Just like all those professors who are over there for Palestine, just like all those people who join leftist organizations that they can't be lawyers or technologists or highly paid gainfully employed people in the military, banking, corporate, or at Boeing, which is where all the gainful employment is, or as a cop, right? So this is the trick. The West has spent all of its time and energy trying to figure out the most, not necessarily complicated, but the West has spent all its time trying to figure out the best ways to enslave everybody else and keep them inside of that mind prison that they could break out of. But the thing is, they are good at it. They are very successful at it. The West, the United States, the Western white world is very successful at it. That's why they have 300. The U.S. has 330 million people deeply in prison. Europe, 500 million people. Canada, 37 million people. Australia, New Zealand, they've got a lot of people trapped in that system. So they're doing a good job. I mean, it's horrible. It's not good, but they're doing a good job keeping people trapped in there. So, anyways, okay. So, but let's move on from that topic. So, how free is your mind, though? There's many other directions I could take this. I can have time to take all of them. ChatGPT is declined to, so let's go to the I have some links open that I have not gone to yet. ChatGPT is linked to declining academic performance and memory loss. So again, there are AI that have uses, right? Now, when it comes to generative AI, I've done many streams just on generative AI, so I don't want to take too much time away from that. I try to focus on the topics I'm trying to zoom in on today. But if you do want to hear more about, I have several different streams about that topic, including gibberocracy, ruled by jibber jabber, ruled by Jabberwocky. No, ruled by acid-laden 1800s British poet. No, gibberocracy is ruled by generative AI nonsense, degenerative AI and cyber biohazards. I've got a whole lot of those. Controlled thinning. The rich don't want us healthy, empowered, or around at all. That directly dovetails with this. But coming back to this specifically, so ChatGPT is linked to declining academic performance and memory loss in new studies. There's a whole lot of stuff coming about what the catastrophic badness of generative AI and the way that it's being used. Let me see if I can find that actual article. The study revealed a concerning trend. Reliance on ChatGPT is causing ChatGPT declining academic performance and memory loss. Students tend to turn to ChatGPT, a generative artificial intelligence tool, when faced with increased academic workload and time constraints, according to a new research published in International Journal of Education Technology and Higher Education. The study also reveals a concerning trend. Reliance on ChatGPT is linked to procrastination, memory loss, and a decline in academic performance. These studies shed light on the role of generative AI in education, suggesting both its widespread use and potential drawbacks. The motivation behind the research stems from the explosive growth of generative AI technologies in educational settings. Despite the potential to assist in learning and research, there's a growing concern among educators about this misuse, especially in relation to academic integrity. Previous studies have largely focused on theoretical discussions without much empirical data to support the claims. My interest in this topic stems from the growing prevalence of generative AI and its potential impact. There's been an increasing uncritical reliance on Gen AI tools among students for various assignments and projects assigned, and they prompted me to delve deeper into understanding the underlying causes. The researchers validated a scale to measure university students' use of ChatGPT. They generated an initial set of 12 items and 10 after expert evaluations for content validity. Further refinement through an exploratory factor analysis and reliability testing led to the final selection of 8 items that effectively measured the extent of ChatGPT's academic use. I use ChatGPT for course assignments. I am addicted to ChatGPT when it comes to studies. ChatGPT is part of my campus life. Anyways, so I'm trying to get like some of the more important, some other little details, but that were important to this video. Students who were more sensitive to rewards were less inclined to use ChatGPT, indicating a possible concern about academic integrity and potential negative consequences of relying on an AI for academic tasks. I just want to say again, this is another way that China is more free. Is as a social Chinese socialism with characteristics is more free than Western liberal democratic capitalists, so-called democratic capitalist nonsense, because they have very, very strict regulations on generative AI use, and they have they have very strict regulations on embezzlement and corruption, and they crack down on capitalists, on the ruling classes, or on people who have accumulated wealth and who would like to rule through wealth. For example, they've beheaded 15 billionaires, and they routinely execute anyone who has a large quantity of money, especially foreigners, but anyone can have all of their wealth quickly confiscated without warning, and it's seriously enforced. And government corruption and embezzlement, these things are met with severest penalties, up to and including death. China has beheaded 15 billionaires. The U.S. has beheaded none, or executed. They executed, but many others have had their wealth completely stripped from them, and the United States has done none, basically ever. It doesn't care to ever do any, except when certain wealthy people put the hit on, attack more wealthy people. It's basically retaliation between billionaires and aristocratic capitalists, disproportionately cis white straight guys, like Bill Gates and etc. and Elon Musk. But in China, like, they actually enforce rules, and one of the rules they enforce is that and this is why it's the housing is affordable, healthcare, housing, and material conditions. There's basically zero actual poverty in China. They have poverty alleviation, and materially their society is just way better than the West. But that's because they enforce the rules through their socialist system and the Communist Party of China. That does what the needs of the people need. And one of the things that they've decided is that using ChatGPT, right, the China decided to strictly stop, right, I'm trying to find that so China revoking degrees for AI aided dissertations. If you get caught using generative AI in China at any time in your career, you will have your degrees revoked. So all your bachelor's, your master's, your PhD, all your degrees will be revoked, and it's for a very good reason, because there's many reasons, but one of them is you don't want a preponderance of falsified information, white paper, science, tech, and knowledge in your critical in your civilization generally, and especially in engineering, mathematics, biology, medicine. You're not gonna be able to do. And this is the thing: scholars, scientists today are saying Google Scholar and modern, the peer-reviewed research sites and sites where you're trying to find articles in your field, right? Whether that's in biotech, whether that's in nanotech, or whatever you're working in, renewable tech, they're being flooded with AI-generated documents. There's like 100 times more, by some counts, 100 times more white papers that are either at some part, sometimes in whole, but it's harder to tell, in part AI generated. Like, one of them is just the rat. Like, I bring up the AI generated rat monstrosity. It was just one of them, right? And this was peer reviewed. This was put in the Frontiers LN, the third most cited scientific peer reviewed journal. It's just like critical to science, right? And it's being flooded with this kind of stuff. Everywhere is being flooded with AI generated nonsense, right? And if your civilization is allowed to be flooded with this nonsense, it limits the ability for actual scientists and knowledge workers and people that are technologists, people trying to make advances in everywhere, in health, in renewable tech, in quantum computing, in in the latest in 5G, 6G, whatever you're working on, it makes it harder and harder. Stem cell research was what like stem cell research has applications, but if stem cell research, when you go to look up what is the latest in stem cell research as an existing scientist or medical expert, and you're coming across all of this fake nonsense, AI generated nonsense, it literally is stunting and truncating all human progress, and worse, eroding the ability for humans to access. I call it library of Babelification, right? This is based on the Jorge Luis Borges story, which is that when you have too much, if you have too much information or too much, if you could have 1,000 books or 1,000,000 books, right? 1,000,000 books sounds better, right? But if you could have 1,000 books, or you could have 1,000,000 books, but 90% of the 1,000,000 books are full of some correct information, but actually it's AI generated nonsense, right? If you have 1,000,000 books and 10% are actual real books that have real true information in them, not seemingly plausible but actually bad AI generated non-information, right? It's better to have 1,000 books, because 10% of 1,000,000 is 100,000. So you could have 100,000 really good books, but if you have to search through 1,000,000 bullshit books, it causes the time and energy constraints on your human brain, right? To even be able to discern through 90% nonsense makes the 100,000 good books set in within 1,000,000, a sea of 1,000,000 bogus books that are hard to. It's not like you open the book and it's like you open the book and it's just all like ABC 1 2 3 nonsense, just complete like monkey at a typewriter. Because AI generated material, AI generated white paper looks like to the lay person like Western thinking, right? Like slavery good, women subservient. It could even appear like at the beginning, oh, this guy sounds sensible, but what it's actually saying is not actually true. And so in that same way, what the generative AI does is it churns out lots of this kind of like seemingly plausible stuff. Like it will say words like, and here in this study on stem cell research, we have taken the deoxyribonucleic acid sequences of 60 different strains of X and Y. It sounds scientific at first glance, but when you get through it, you realize this is actually cobbled together, AI generated spouted nonsense. The same thing has happened for legal papers. The same thing has happened for everything: tech papers, journalistic articles, entire cookbooks, entire tabletop RPG books are being AI generated, including the art. Everything is being AI generated, and it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell if what you're getting is useful information or if it's bogus gibberish until you could spend 5 minutes, you could spend an hour, and not realize that AI had stolen. You have to, when you actually look, this one, the lawyers were figuring out that the judge in a court case had to throw out a case, but it took the judge a while, over an hour, reading through previous case study. Like there's a case where like lawyers at a law firm had AI generated, they had AI generated fake cases basically, but the judge had to read through the cases. A lot of the language in the case, right, it was legitimate. It's like basically legitimate, right? But they were specific. It was a lawsuit due to people being harmed by the carts on an airplane, right? When the judge looked up the specific airlines, the judge looked up the specific airlines and the specific plaintiffs and the specific flights, the judge found out this flight didn't exist. This person never sued that airline, right? Or maybe that person did sue the airline, but the date was like way off, right? Or that person sued an airline, but they sued United Airlines, not Alaska Airlines. So that's actually worse, right? It would actually be if AI if for example, if you want to generate a case law or a white paper or a science, tech, engineering, mathematics book or a journalistic article, and AI just put out like a bunch of random letters and symbols, it'd be easier to deal with, because you'd be like, oh well, this is just a bunch of gibberish. It would be easy to filter, right? But the thing is, generative AI, it takes a lot of time and energy to go through. That's why editors are having nightmares. Moderators, the editors are like, how do we even moderate this? The answer is they can't. It's really difficult. Under the current, without strict regulations on generative AI, your entire civilization is going to be flooded with nonsense, and it's going to Library of Babylify, which is to say, make useless formerly useful information. This is why scholars and experts have to Google search and Google Scholar search before 2022, because there's an event horizon, like a black hole of death that just sucks everything. Everything after 2022 becomes, a intractable, ineffable, unverifiable, unmoderatable, ungatekeepable black hole of the vastness of the nonsense that preponderates. The time it takes to even figure out which is AI generated BS and which is true is so vast. There is not even enough humans to go through that. You see, like the problem is not even. This is contributing to the fall of the West as well, because other smarter civilizations, more advanced civilizations like China are figuring this. They figured it out earlier. They're like, we can't let this stuff preponderate. Letting AI generated nonsense preponderate throughout your civilization. It's like letting COVID unnecessarily preponderate and propagate through the civilization. It's catastrophically bad, right? And it's also COVID. Also, I didn't even talk about it, but COVID is also why your mind isn't free. Because how free can your mind be when your brain is addled, not just with ChatGPT bullshit and all just normal Western bullshit like we've talked about, and racist, sexist nonsense, but then also it's being flooded with vast quantities, billions of copies of the furin cleavage site advanced virus is probably generated inside of a lab. Although we have no specific receipts yet, that are splitting open your neurons and causing mass very badly applied cytokines, and is causing the actual bits of your brain to fuse together. Your brain is put into a prison of brain fog and brain damage and dementia, right? Dementia is a kind of prison in and of itself, right? And so I don't want to go. I'll come back to the COVID at the very end. That's the last thing that's imprisoning minds, and imprisoning you inside of a house of your own mass disabling chronic fatigue syndrome, where you can't even move. You can move for 30 minutes a day, and then you're taken out the rest of the day. You're in a prison of the lack of your body's ability to move, kind of like starving in Palestine. Except for them it's worse, because they have no even possibility of controlling that. But you can be trapped in a prison of your own flesh, as they say, and also a prison of your own degenerating brain power as you get COVID. But even before that, you have the digital artificial intelligence cyber degeneration of the entire civilization, the inability for people to think, the inability for people to find that information in the sea of nonsense, right? And that is part of what's happening. This is also why the West is falling behind China. And that's only going to accelerate the more that ChatGPT is allowed. The more that ChatGPT is allowed, because you don't have strict regulations and rules, you don't even have the capacity to enforce them, because Larry Summers and the richest, most powerful people, the biggest capitalists, are all invested in generative AI, like OpenAI, which is also run by Zionists, by the way. Like the lead designer said that Palestine doesn't exist and all the Palestinians deserve to die. He literally said that. So just on that count, it's generative AI, Western generative AI certainly, and OpenAI is a very, very, very deeply horrific institution. But then also the products that they're putting out, and so again, you can't stop this. It's almost like the West is unable to prevent the human generation of eloquent mind shackles, like we already said. But then also the hyper acceleration of artificial intelligence, cyber generated mind shackles. That's Western, nonsensical output. That's for gaslighting and perpetuating these oppressive, unjust, not complex, but not complex systems like racism, capitalism, colonialism, etc. And so the ChatGPT it's almost like a runaway train of it's like a matrix that is shackling itself to death with its own shackles, and its shackles are like we can't even figure out how to stop our own shackles. Like, how do we regulate AI? We can't regulate anything because we're completely cash-up by plutocracy that only seeks the almighty dollar and profit motive, and we can't figure out how to rein that in, because even if we wanted to, we're shackled into our own. Even the cis white straight billionaires like Elon Musk are like shackled into their own Western ideology, right? They have all the freedom in the world with their billions and their cisness and their whiteness and their madness and their colonial privilege and their aristocratic privilege, and their feudal privilege, because they all come from lords and ladies of the houses of Windsor. And they're like, even they can't, like, even they'll say, like, billionaires have even said, like, I wish I could change something about this system, but even with all my money and all my power and everything I have, I can't really do anything because my money, the system has a mind of its own. This is the paradox of, like, the Western freeness. You don't have the freeness. Like, a billionaire cannot end capitalism, right? Even if many of them all decided we really want to end it. I mean, they can do things that could massively support the end of it, but it's like throwing all their money into Black, Indigenous, people of color, radical left movements and organizations, especially in the global South. That could help. But none of them individually can go to capitalism and say, hey, let's stop doing everything according to what makes the most short-term profits for a tiny minority of people. None of them can actually do that. None of them can stop. Even the West can't stop it. Joe Biden even himself said, like, when asked, why are you bombing Yemen, one of the poorest Arab country that you have bombed and genocided and starved, hundreds of thousands of people died? Why are you bombing Yemen? You're bombing Yemen, and they're not even stopping their operations. And Joe Biden responded with it seems paradoxical, but it makes a lot of sense from a Western perspective, right? Joe Biden said, are the bombings in Yemen working? No. Will the bombings continue? Yes. Right? Now, like, that seems like, why would you keep doing something that isn't working, right? But that is the Western logic. Even Joe Biden, even the empire managers, they cannot even figure out how to get. They are so finally shackled by their own systems that they've built over 3,000 years. They can't figure out how to even try to break free of them. Like, we're doing things that aren't working, but there is no alternative, right? Like, we're doing things that aren't working. We're continuing down this imperialist, colonialist, oppressive, unjust, hierarchical path, economically, internationally, ethnically, race-wise, gender-wise, health-wise, pandemic-wise. We're doing these catastrophically bad things. We're all like wrapped up in the shackles of thousands of years of Aristotle's and Jefferson's, word salading each other over their highballs with their cardigans and with their overpriced wine farmed by Afro-Asiatics and served by their enslaved women. And they're just like, all this word salad has locked them into a prison of their own spun bullshit mile-long sentences that they need to have some. Aristotle, you got to find a period somewhere, man. Too many. You're like trapped. You're trapped in the prison cell bars of your own massive, unnecessary parenthetical sentence writing, and you can't find your way out of that. Like, the West can't find its way out of that because it doesn't know what else to do except like a juggernaut, like a juggernaut made of disinformation and broken, misfiring missiles and Boeing death planes. just keep on propelling itself forward with hot air, and it's very sad. But that is, in the end, that is the final prison of the West that it's dying in, right? Even its leadership can't figure out how to free its own mind from its own shackles. You'd think that they'd be like, hey, just stop doing genocide. Can you just stop? That's very basic. Can you just stop doing genocide that we're all watching all day long on all of our phones? We're watching you kill everyone with flower massacres. Can you stop at least that one? There are people in every street, in every place, right? They're like, can you stop that one? But they can't stop that one. Even that one seems like a no-brainer, but they can't figure out how to stop that one. the beginning for the West will be when it figures out how to begin. That's why it's like it's really like it's, you have to I don't know what it has to do, but it's like obviously the actions have to continue. Obviously, all these protests and all the attempts, the banging on the prisons of the Western world and the U.S.-led so-called rules-based slave order. People continuing to go to the protests and going to actions and doing online and all the tactics that they're taking is necessary to keep going. But it's necessary that those actions continue and people not lose hope of breaking out of the prison of the unfree U.S.-led international, etc. order. But you also have to accept that that's where you are at, and not tell yourself nonsense like I forget. I think it was trying to get the. It recently came out. Okay, it was Switzerland mostly. It's because they have the least banking laws. The Human Freedom Index, was it 2024? I think it was this one. So the most free, obviously we know what they're gonna say, right? The most free is of course all the Western countries. All the Western countries. The more American, the better. The more in your orbit they are, the better. And everywhere that's outside of that is unfree and bad and nasty. Israel is super free. Israel is very free according to this. Oh my God. Anyways. Okay, so let's finish up. It's 1:23. Okay, so I talked about ChatGPT and how that's if you're having memory loss and you're losing your academic performance, how are you going to be free if you're becoming more diseducated, right, and unable to remember even what you're doing? If you get, and then finally, I alluded to the COVID, but let's just talk a little bit about that one before we end. A preschooler died after having a common cold. So this is also the Western brain prison, right? Which is that Western media, right, can say things like, yes, it was normal. It's normal for 4-year-olds to die from strokes from colds. Okay. I don't like. This is the Western brain prison that people can publish this article. You can have articles like this coming out in mainstream media, and people be like, oh yeah, that's totally normal and acceptable. This is part of that. Like, this is nonsense. People don't. Okay, I know that not everybody here is a scientist and a medical expert, and not everybody here is has an accredited degree to practice medicine. Is sanctioned by the American Medical Association. Okay, but they themselves have a lot of problems. The Western so-called medicine has a lot of non-medicinal properties. But okay, in case you didn't know this, colds do not cause strokes. Okay, colds don't cause strokes. But this is where you're at. You're at complete. This is 1984. This is double speak. This is war is peace, health. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Colds cause strokes. 4-year-olds get strokes. Not normal. Okay. A 4-year-old from Strongsville, Ohio, has died after she was hospitalized for complications from a common cold that caused her to have a stroke that required emergency brain surgery. Okay. The fact that this can be published says that this is the brain shackles. This is the brain death of the West. I mean, I'm not trying to make a insensitive pun there, but I mean, literally, like, the fact, like, it's almost like the entire U.S. and the West is having a stroke themselves, right? It's like, how can you publish this nonsense? How can you publish that? Right? Now, I think it's less that all of the West has collectively had a stroke, and it's some of it is to just incorrect and ignorant and disinformed. Okay, but the quotes around the common cold, the quotes around the common cold are saying We kind of know that it's probably not a cold, but legally we don't want to say it because we're scared. Okay, so that goes back to the other reasons, right? So the dollars, okay, so the capitalism that is prioritizing profits over people and sacrificing everyone, has sacrificed millions of people's 30 million plus people died for capitalism so they could make money during the pandemic, pushing everyone back to work, sickening children, sickening everyone, killing and mass disabling everyone, giving them chronic fatigue, long COVID, catastrophic brain damage, Alzheimer's, dementia, HIV, AIDS level damage to immune system, blood damage and all organ damage, kidney failure, just so they can make tons of money. So this is the dollars chaining the minds of people, the people, authors, and also the readers who are eating this stuff up, right? Consuming this nonsense that strokes cause colds, right? But the quotes are there so that legally People magazine in the future can avoid lawsuits for disinforming people. I think that's what the quotes, or either that or the West has so much brain damage because the average American has had 3 to 6 or possibly 7 COVID reinfections, which each reinfection magnifies the probability of long COVID, which includes massive brain damage. And actually brain damage is showed even in mild COVID to be the norm, not the anomaly. Okay, so it's possible that there's so much brain damage in the West, that in the U.S. and certainly, that people just forgot. People have the equivalent of strokes, and they're just forgetting that colds don't cause strokes. They can't remember, right? COVID causes holes in memory, and they can't remember what it was like. They can't remember that colds just cause you to sneeze and maybe cough, and you have a little bit of itchiness and dry eyes for a bit, and then they go away. They don't cause 4-year-olds to have strokes. Okay, so that's but it, the strokes are caused by the COVID that is giving brain damage. There's a whole video if you want to watch. Here's a whole lot of studies. You want more direct information about how COVID-19 will damage your brain and thereby imprison you in a quiet solitary confinement cell of your own dark, distorted thoughts, if you have any thoughts left. Here is a list of studies, right? Fusion between neurons and glial cells, which comprise neuron activity, persistence of viral RNA or protein inside of the brain, constant reinflammation and autoimmune disorder, and attack the body, attacking and inflaming the brain, causing encephalitis due to this persistence. Even after COVID may be largely eliminated, viral particulates continue to get attacked. It's all of this research that you can find. Elevation in cytokine levels and increased microglial activity, hippocampal microglia and increased neurogenesis, persistent loss of oligodendrocytes and myelinated axons. So again, like these are all separate. These are all separate mechanisms that damage the brain from COVID. Again, thrombosis. Also, this doesn't even include the microclots that cause small strokes and sometimes large strokes. Strokes are very common. Strokes and heart events very common in COVID patients. Even if the medical system is not connecting the stroke and the heart attack to the COVID, obviously that's the case with that ridiculous article about 4-year-olds having strokes from colds. But because COVID does cause these microclots, and that with enough COVID and enough COVID reinfections is at a certain point, it's basically almost guaranteed you will have a stroke. You will have a massive brain damaging event at any age. At any age, if you keep getting reinfected, the probability goes to 100%. With reinfections, you will get one or many of these problems. Anyway, and so there's a whole long, there's so much research about this stuff. Okay. So part of the brain imprisonment is because your brain is being damaged from COVID and then you can't even think. So you're locked in the shackles of, again, your lack of ability to even think. And then you're also locked in with the cap, so the money prison and the disease prison together, right? It's like the capital is incentivizing you to not think about COVID, and the normalization of a sick unhealthy, self-interested society, as opposed to collective health, public health-based society, caring about the community rather than individual selfishness. That and the group thinking, like I talked about in previous streams, that's causing even more so all of these. That is encouraging people to not see the reality of COVID, imprisoning you in a mind of fake normality, and then you get COVID, and then your mind gets smaller and smaller. So you see how like the money and the physical pandemic inside your body work together to crush you down into a smaller and a smaller, more enslaved, more trapped person. It's also important to note when you get long COVID, not really if, it's really a when you get long COVID from repeat reinfections. If you continue to not mask, distance, try to have the best ventilated air and not take risks with the airborne aerosolized pandemic we're in. If you continue to go down that path, right, eventually what will happen is the long COVID horror nightmare of where you wake up, all you can do is put your clothes on, like walk 10 steps, and then you're winded and you can't move for an hour. You can't do anything. Get trapped in unable to do the things that make you happy. Sometimes you can't even type. You can't go for a walk, you can't go for a jog. You can't leave your house. You can't go to a concert. You can't go anywhere. You can't go to your work. You can't go to play. You can't go to the beach. You can't do anything. You can't even think for half the day because your brain is clogged with the brain fogged brain. You are in a prison of your brain fog, which is from the brain damage that you got from repeat COVID infections. And if you do 15 minutes, one day you might feel good enough to do 30 minutes of activity, and then you're out for 3 days straight. You can't do anything. Okay. And then you'll be trapped in a prison of your body, unable to move, unable to leave your house, praying that you have any friends or family that are increasingly getting themselves COVID. And what will happen is the medical system will not be there for you. The medical system, the health system will not be there for you. Take it from people who have already suffered long COVID. Okay? The United States is writing articles, like this guy is writing articles on the front page of New York Times, right? Kill the weak. Soon we accept useless lives should end. So what will be there for you? This is, again, mainstream, like the New York Times, Atlantic, Guardian, BBC. They're putting stories like this out. Euthanasia isn't that bad. Disabled people don't need to be. Your life will end. Your short, truncated life, unable to move, disabled and in pain, unable to think, unable to walk without getting winded, will end when you run out of money and funds, and then you pass on from the torture that was your long COVID life. It's not going to end with some happy story like in George Clooney's ER. This is how your life will end. So don't get locked into the prison of the capitalism, Western colonial capitalist history of thousands of years of generated bullshit, eloquent brain shackles, the police state, and the COVID brain prison. Don't willingly jump into another layer of shackles. There's another important lesson for people right now, and I have many videos about that. Do not disempower yourself from the ability to break out of your prison by taking all these unnecessary risks by not masking when you go into public spaces, number one. Because not if, when you fall into a deeper prison, the possibility of getting out, again, that's part of my video on, controlled thinning. The rich don't want you healthy, empowered, or alive, right? And so the admittance, and this is part of what this video centers. These new articles are showing the admittance that this is the final goal, right? We don't need people around. There's too many people around. And again, it's important to reiterate. Again, I'm trying to find where is his article. He had an article on. That guy who wrote this article just published an article that says, assistance in death is necessary. We need disabled and infirm and weak people to die. Basically, we need people that are sick. We need disabled to die. This is being pushed by mainstream articles now. Okay, it's already been doing. Canada has been doing it. The Netherlands has been putting down autistic people and disabled people. They've always been killing disabled people, but now it's a formal statement of the way this. Hitler also killed his first mass killing was of disabled people, by the way. this is a formal policy coming out. So there is no cancer is not that bad. It was a recent article as well. So cancer, getting COVID, all of this is not that bad, and a lot of this is because there is a massive advocacy. People who are disabled from COVID are some of the biggest advocates against all of all of these interlocking systems because these have harmed them, right? And so one of the solutions, a final solution, one might say, is to liquidate all the people who are upset at you, right? If disabled people are causing a ruckus for the greedy, capitalist, anti-scientific class that has allowed the pandemic to spread, kill all the disabled people. Final solution. So I'm not saying that's what will happen, but if you get more sick than you already are, your capacity to resist this. I mean, what should happen is people who are not that disabled yet should be going double time to show up and do all the actions and work as hard as they can to try to overthrow all of these structures before everyone is so disabled that people like Matthew Paris have their way and they liquidate whoever remains. Now, I'm not saying like that is going, and tomorrow the U.S. military will roll out and liquidate every disabled person. But that is the goal. Stated goal. Nuclear war, also, this is very important too. It's like nuclear war, all the other forms of nuclear and biological warfare are not off the table either. And if the ruling, when the ruling class gets very desperate, these things are going to get closer, which is closer and closer to the forefront, which is just more reason that we need as many people that are not, I mean, I am disabled. I'm not as disabled as some people, but everyone who is partially disabled or very able should take all the energy and the resources and the gift of having a functioning body and brain that they have left, right, to fight for all these things that are not fully, completely gone yet. You know what I'm saying? And when you risk your more abled health with not masking, with going to these risky events, you are doing a disservice to everyone else who is trapped in the prison of their catastrophically bad long COVID, trapped in their, not to say like wheelchairs are like bad, but like they are unable to physically walk. You can only move in their wheelchair. Some can't even leave their house, right? They are enslaved to the illness that was unnecessarily propagated through the world for capitalism, for the billionaires. Okay, so you have to maintain that freedom. You have to listen to the people outside the matrix of the Western capitalist, colonialist, etc. world to keep, work on getting your mind out of that prison as well, getting it out of the capital prison. So it means having a non-capitalist, non-imperial controlled economic source to keep yourself sustained, right? As any free place does, like Vietnam and Yemen and Cuba, so that you can't be bought off by the ruling capitalist, colonialist, imperialist, genocide-doing class, right? That's how we, Silver Spoon Cooperative, we can say the things that we say, and we can still function because we're funded directly by people that are our Patreon patrons. I can say all the anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist things I want here. I can't say literally anything, but I can say things that are against the interests of all those systems, because I'm not paid. I'm not working for a corporation, major U.S. Western corporation, a government, nonprofit, etc., university or bank. Universities, people try to at University of Hawaii and tag me to try to get me, to threaten me with getting fired from the university. That has happened several times, but they can't do that because I don't work for them, because that's a capitalist colonial establishment. So economically freeing yourself as much as possible, keeping yourself as free from the shackles of COVID damage as much as possible and long COVID damage, keeping your mind free from the brain shackles of over relying on or even using ChatGPT, propagating that nonsense into the world, and also reducing your brain's capacity by not exercising your muscles and letting it go by the wayside, your mental muscles to go by the wayside as well. And also, fighting against the police state that you live in. If you're in the West, you are in one. And of course, in the upper left is Skynet. You got to watch out for that. Your robot overlords. I mean, not really. It's human overlords using automated drones. It's not really robot overlords, but I mean, keeping yourself free from all those things is very important because and helping everyone else break out from that is very important going forward. That's the end of the stream. Thanks very much for watching. Until next time, keep your mirror straight. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't forget, everything we do is supported by direct support through Ko-Fi at ko-fi.com/silverspook. You can also support us at patreon.com/Neofeud to give us ongoing support to keep doing this education, to keep freeing minds like Neo in the Matrix, to keep us doing this education and also decolonial work here in U.S. occupied Hawaii. Oh, by the way, one more thing, just a quick update. I also want to throw it out there because it's happening now. Speaking of colonialism and Palestine, the United States fake state of Hawaii's governors there is having a horrible continued oppression of many thousands of homeless people in Hawaii that are growing every day, that are homeless in Maui after the Lahaina fires, and they doubled our rents to $8,000 average rents in Hawaii after Lahaina. The U.S. government is propping up landlords in the colonial ethnic cleansing of us Native Hawaiians from our lands. And these are many homeless children still on the beach 7 months after the Lahaina fire, still homeless, all backed by the U.S. government and backing the landlords, collecting huge money for vacation rentals. When you fly to Hawaii, you're making these people homeless. Do not fly to Hawaii. Do not fly to Hawaii. Do not vacation in Hawaii. U.S. colonial capitalist occupiers continue siding with wealthy landlords against us Hawaiians. Governor Green decided yet again to side with landlords over the safety of our displaced Maui community that cannot afford long-term housing. This is one of us that's still living out on the beach. When you go into a Hawaii hotel, the U.S. and the capitalists are saying, well, we need that hotel to serve those tourists, and so you Hawaiians have to leave. This is what's happening. So it's literally, when you fly, if you're taking up a hotel spot, they're kicking Hawaiians out of those housing spaces. What we want affordable housing to actually for people that are Hawaiians living and working in Hawaii. And so, but the U.S. is literally saying we need to have more tourists. You need to leave Hawaii as a Hawaiian. So this is the action that's happening right now. It's strong. There are more displaced individuals here with nowhere to go, while the hotel bars are packed with visitors. Every night, families they decide whether they'll move away forever. Born and raised Maui Hawaiians are forced off homeland. Every day, there are Hawaiians being forced out. They're leaving Hawaii, and the tourism industry is directly complicit in this. They're bribing the government to keep the prices as high as possible, charge as much as possible, kick Hawaiians out of these temporary housing as possible, to force them into like tents, and then ideally push as many Hawaiians out of Hawaii as possible. It's straight up settler colonial. It's like Palestine in Hawaii, but with less directly damaging and less direct killing and bombings. But it's the same goal: ethnically cleansing and removing all Hawaiians who are fundamentally indigenous, anti-capitalist, anti-colonial, environmentally sustainable people under illegal U.S. occupation. And this whole operation is about, and this action happening today on Maui. So I just wanted to shout that out because this is happening today. Is an action Lahaina Strong for dignified housing in West Maui, meeting at Fishing for Housing Occupation in front of Leilani's. So if you're in Hawaii, this is a thing that you can do, but obviously I have a more international audience, so this is about letting everybody know this is what's still happening here. And if you want to support actions like helping us keep on doing anti-colonial actions as Native Hawaiian, anti-capitalist, anti-colonialist Silver Spook Cooperative, like Huawei, a worker cooperative that is not run by a handful of the wealthiest people in the world for their own personal profit, but rather democratically operated Silver Spook business and Silver Spook housing with no bosses and no landlords. You can support us at patreon.com/Neofeud and get access to like updates on what we're doing to restore the land itself. This is like we're trying to restore more of the ecology from colonial lawns and destructive monocropping. And also we're trying to make pandemic related education like Lone Massacre. Obviously I'm finishing the cyberpunk adventure sequel to Neofeud 1, Neofeud 2. And you get access to all those things, the Silver Spook Discord and behind the scenes, and Silver Spook University when you become a patron at any level. Silver Spook University as I said, Silver Spring University is the crowbar to break out of the Western colonial capitalist mind prison. It is indigenous education that combines decolonized history, current struggles, imagined futures, cultural analysis from a Native Hawaiian activist, educator, and science fiction writer perspective. That's my perspective. And it's what you need to know today. What do you need to know today? What do your children need to know today? Western lies about past, present, and future permeate formal schooling, modern books, and media. So this is everything I've been talking about today. But you get more of that categorized according to topics in this Silver Spook University. Just like a massive archive, basically. Because the West is teaching, liberals are teaching the classics like this Aristotelian, just very very pro-slavery, pro-sexism, not very very antiquated, not very good education. And then there's the PragerU is teaching entire curriculums for entire states in places. So this is really, it's dangerous for children. It's dangerous in schools, not just because of the COVID that's preponderant and the measles that's gone up. All-time high, record highs of measles currently breaking out, but also it's dangerous because of things they're putting in children's minds in schools. Is not good. So that's what Silver Spook University is for. It's not just for kids; it's also for adults, of course. And that's what you get when you become a Silver Spook patron. You can also support us by grabbing games like Neofeud on Steam, which is on sale for a little bit longer. It is anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist cyberpunk adventure game, where a cyborg social worker, for homeless robots, a delinquent robot criminal, a criminal who broke out of a prison, and a former drug dealer, and a socialist ex-trillionaire princess try to overthrow all of these systems in a cyberpunk satirical adventure game. And if you have a second to leave even a very short review of Neofeud, is massively appreciated if you like the game, because it helps us get the game discovered in the Steam algorithm. You can also follow Silver Spook Games. You can also get Neofeud on itch.io for Windows and for Mac and for Linux over here. I'm the content director. I'm the creator of this game, and it's also a game that, it's a game that I've worked on for 2.5 years and did basically everything except about half of the voice acting on this game, and does support everything we do here. You can follow at SilverSpookGames at Octanon.social, at SilverSpookGames at Mastodon.social, on Twitter at SilverSpookGuy for my personal posts. Oh, also, happy Trans Day of Awareness. I'm also, it identifies Mahu, which is it's somewhere, it's not a Mahu is not really hard. It's a Hawaiian word that's difficult to describe in the English language, but it is Trans Day of Awareness, and in some ways it's described as a trans person. Some Mahu people would use that term along with gay and also bi and gender fluid. I definitely would call myself gender fluid for sure. But happy Trans Day of Visibility. This is one of my recent Fallout get-ups. I'm playing a lot of Fallout, so I put radioactive symbols on my face, and I digitally dyed my hair green in celebration of Fallout. But anyways, you can follow at SilverSpookGuy and at SilverSpookGames for the games related stuff. SilverSpookGames for the games related stuff, and you can also follow Terminus C. Terminus C is the Terminus Cyberstar account, which is a cyberpunk RPG, and it is a cyberpunk RPG in the vein of Deus Ex and System Shock 2 that I'm the content director and the lead writer of that game. Holly is, of course, our partner here at the Silver Spook Cooperative, and you can follow Holly at the Tech Fairy, producer and more for the Kate Nix Twitch and music variety show, parent caregiver of 2 Native Hawaiian children, writer, educator, sapphic queer person, MECFS. Holly already has long-term health conditions that are very difficult to live with. We don't need more, and that's why masking is important. And so follow Holly there, and of course, thank you all of you who are Patreon patrons for your continued support. Without this support, it is difficult for us to keep on doing our work. So thanks so much for that. And until next time, keep your mirror shades polished, be excellent to each other, and watch out for the keep yourself free your mind as much as you possibly can manage. If not for yourself, for everyone else who needs your assistance in getting in the